Friendly physics for faster sailing. Sailing theory explained. Today we're answering these questions. Why aren't you making the mark? Why do you get left behind off the start? And why can't you keep up with the boats around you? The answer to all these questions is the same. All these problems have a common cause, and understanding just one concept can improve your sailing in all these areas. Let's use the first question, making the mark, as an example. You perform a clean tack on the lay line. It looks like you'll easily make the mark, but as you get closer, it's not looking so good. You're much too low to make the mark. What happened? Let's learn a couple choice words. Not the ones you mudded to yourself when you lost all that ground, some words that will actually help you. Heading is the direction your boat is pointed, and course over ground, the actual path your boat takes from one point to another. Here you are, sailing toward the mark on the lay line, or so you think. You think that because your heading, the direction your boat is pointing, appears to be right on track to round the mark with plenty of room to spare. And that would be absolutely true if you were driving a car. But a car does travel exactly in the direction that you point it, and sailboats don't. In sailing, our heading is almost never the same as the actual path of the boat. Your heading is where your bow is pointed. That's the number you see on the compass. But course over ground is the actual path along which the boat travels. This boat is starting out with the same heading as the last example where the boat moves straight down the blue line. The heading stays the same and the compass reads the same as before, but the boat follows a different path, several degrees lower. The difference between the heading and the course over ground is called leeway. There will always be a little leeway, and it's not all bad. We actually need some leeway in order for our blades to create lift underwater, but managing and minimizing leeway is the key to better sailing. So what creates excess leeway? The three biggest contributors to excess leeway are too much heeling, going too slow, and over-trimming your sail. And each of these things has a detrimental effect on one specific part of your boat. Would you be surprised to hear it's your dagger board? That little guy is way more important and more powerful than we give it credit for. Have you ever considered what a dagger board is? It's an underwater sail. It's doing the exact same job as your sail, but it's doing it with water instead of air. Because water is so much denser than air, the dagger board doesn't need to be huge like a sail to create the same amount of force. When the forces on the dagger board balance the forces on the sail, the rest of the energy goes into moving the boat forward. If those forces get unbalanced, we get excessive sideways movement of the boat, also known as leeway. Let's take a closer look at how this works, starting with heel. We know we are supposed to sail flat. From the very beginning, we are taught, keep it flat, and we probably are all still getting scolded for heeling too much, and we probably all deserve it. Even when you feel flat, you aren't flat. And it's especially important in sunfish because our blades are so little in proportion to our sail area, so we are already a little unbalanced. We need our dagger board working to the max, which means we need it vertical in the water. When our board is vertical, we can sail straight because our board is balancing our sail. But the boat that is heeled is crippling her dagger board, and the sideways force of the wind on the sail is winning the balance battle. And that boat is experiencing a lot of leeway. Watch these two boats sail toward the windward mark and see what happens to the heeled boat. See how that heeled boat loses ground to the flat boat? Because of the heel, more of its total power is being used to push the boat sideways and less is going to forward motion. It's pretty clear who's going to lay the mark and who's going to have to tack. Next up, boat speed. The slower your boat speed, the more leeway you will have. The quicker the boat is moving, the better the dagger board can do its job. And here's why. The slower boat on the left is unbalanced, and it's going to be forced sideways just like the heeled boat in the previous example. This boat is flat, but it's still unbalanced. As boat speed increases, the forces become more balanced. In fact, when you double your boat speed, you quadruple the lift generated by your board. But at low boat speeds, you will always have more leeway, and you will never be able to go upwind as well as a boat that is moving faster. That's why they say boat speed is king. It is, in fact, possible to over-trim your sail. As we're learning, we're constantly told to trim more, trim harder, and so we think that is always the answer. So here's a note for the newbies at this point. You probably do need to trim harder, but this info is good to know as your sailing feel develops. Over trim unbalances you. It generates more sideways force on the sail and overpowers the ability of the dagger board to balance that force. So even if you are flat and moving quickly, which is the right time to trim in a bit, if you overdo it, you can start to slide. This is really easy to do if you've overstood the mark and you're reaching in. If you stay trimmed in too hard, you will feel a lot of power, but much of that power is going to pushing the boat sideways when it could be feeding your forward speed if you just ease out a bit. Let's see an example of the consequences of this on the race course. 4 boats coming off the start. Let's assume the line is perfectly square, the wind is even across the course, they all had a perfect start, and they are all moving at the same speed. So answer to yourself. At this point, are all these boats tied? Anyone doing better or worse here? And some bonus info, all these boats are sailing with a compass, and each boat's compass reads 45 degrees. If I put a straight line across the boats, the answer starts to be more obvious. So if everything is the same for all these boats, why are some doing better? The difference is course over ground. Remember, it doesn't matter what the compass heading is, it matters what track the boat is actually taking. By the way, this exercise isn't meant to be a trick. It's to demonstrate that the difference is just pretty hard to see, and that's both on screen and in real life, especially when the boats have only traveled a relatively short distance. Let's look at this in terms of leeway angle. It's just the difference between compass heading and course over ground, so it's pretty easy to see that these small deviations in leeway, especially over small distances, but let's see what happens over the course of an entire upwind leg. After sailing these angles for 0.5 nautical miles, which is a typical distance for an upwind leg for small boats, those small differences in leeway amplify into significant losses. So the pink boat had 1 degree more leeway than the green boat, and after half a mile, it's lost 3.5 boat lengths. If you had 3 degrees more leeway, you've lost 8 boat lengths. And if you had 5 degrees more leeway, you've lost 14 boat lengths. So you can see how much you can lose. And these losses are the best case scenario. This assumes that all 4 boats are actually traveling at the exact same speed. But in reality, it's highly likely that the boats with more leeway are also moving slower. So they probably lose much more distance than shown here. So this is great and all, but it's just a concept until we put it into practice. So let's talk about how we bring all this theory out on the water and actually use it. When we are racing, where do we see these things all the time? Think about those difficult areas we started with, approaching the windward mark, right after starting, trying to match with other boats. In those situations where we desperate to make the mark or hang with that other boat or get off the start line without being shuffled back. And so to do that, we end up trying to trim really hard, point really high, and now we are pinching and the boat is slowing down. And so we often react by letting the boat heel because that feels powered up. And now we've achieved the leeway trifecta. We're over trimmed, we're heeled, and we're slow. And now we know we are just losing boats left and right when we do this. The tricky thing is, it might actually feel okay for a while, which is how people get stuck here. The heel tricks you into thinking you have forward speed by giving you that powered up feeling. The problem is that power is going into pushing your boat sideways through the water instead of giving you more forward speed. You're pointed high, too high probably, but it looks good to the eye like you're matching the boats around you, but this is a kind of illusion. The problem is you are actually going slow and sliding sideways and everyone is passing you. So let's talk about what to do instead in the simplest possible terms. It all starts with going fast. You can't do anything else until you get the boat moving. You can try, but it's a waste of time. You'll have to start with boat speed. When you feel slow, you need to ease to build speed. There's a phrase, when in doubt, ease it out. You will need to trim in later, but you can't trim while you're going slow. You need to earn the right to trim. You may need to put the bow down a little bit to get things going. You don't have to go reaching off into oblivion, just foot off enough to build speed. Once you're going fast, the apparent wind moves forward and you'll be able to trim the sail. When you get close to full trim, remember to trim in small increments, like a click or two at a time, and be ready and willing to ease if you lose your speed. It's going to happen, so just be ready to ease and get the speed back up. And of course, we are staying flat. The groove is that perfect spot where you're going upwind at the optimum speed and angle. Here's a hint. The groove is not a straight line. Staying in the groove usually requires sailing a very subtle serpentine. Point a bit higher, you'll coast with your momentum for a bit, but before you lose too much speed, you need to come back down a hair to keep your power. If you take only one thing away from this seminar, let this be it. Go fast first. Boat speed is the prerequisite for everything else you want to do. You must have boat speed before you can trim harder or point higher. Thanks for watching. You now have a practical understanding of the ideas that this diagram is meant to convey, so congrats on acing physics.